Welcome to the Indigo Podcast, an exploration of human flourishing at work and beyond. I'm Ben Barron of Indigo Anchor and Cleveland State University.
And I'm Chris Everett of Indigo Anchor. For more information, please visit us at www.indigopodcast.com. All right, so today's episode's a bit of a grab bag from our listeners. We're going to explore leadership styles, personal, professional boundaries, and a few other things. But let's do some housekeeping, Ben.
Okay, so some housekeeping. So a couple things. First of all, we're recording this here in February, mid-February, and we are getting really stoked for the Society for Industrial and Organizational Psychology annual conference coming up here in April in Austin. It's going to be an awesome time. If you happen to be of the industrial and organizational psychology ilk, or if you are if you are, then you probably already know about the conference. But if you happen to be in Austin and you just want to say hi to us or whatever, reach out. And it's going to be really great because we're doing a whole bunch of really cool things on Wednesday this is in April, as I mentioned, Wednesday, April 22nd. I'm doing a big project and event called Accelerating Performance in a Turbulent World. An evening of dialogue about leadership and culture where we're going to have some awesome guests. We're going to have Alexis Fink from Facebook talking about people analytics and strategy. Angela Jeffrey, she's the head of global talent at JLL. Patrick Hyland, who's the director of research and development at Mercer, and Allison Earing, she's the founder and CEO of Organization Solutions. We're going to have this awesome panel talking about leadership and culture. Let me know if you want more information about that. As always, you can contact us, indigotogether.com/contact, indigotogether.com/contact. That's on April 22nd in Austin, Texas. Then the rest of that week, we're going to be there for the conference. And it's going to be fun. It's going to be Chris's first time at this conference.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. One of the cool things about these kind of national conferences is just the amount of thinkers that are all in one group, Yeah. These aren't, this is an amateur hour as far as research and participation in the field. And so I'm really looking forward to those kinds of things.
Yeah. I mean, it's going to be, 4,000 or 5,000 people really nerding out on the human side of the workplace. It's so awesome. So, we're going to be talking, I have a presentation on that Thursday talking about qualitative research and how to use that to drive organizational change. You and I are both going to be on a panel doing a cool thing on agility in the new world of work with implications for talent and leadership management. That's going to be on the Friday, April 24th. And then the last day, we're going to do some cool stuff about veterans in the workplace. So it's going to be a really fantastic time.
Right. And in that note, so if you are going to this conference, do ping us through the website. We'd love to meet up some of our listeners. And the main way that we grow, since we're not sponsored or, doing any of these things, is if you find value in what you hear on this podcast, please, what do they say? Like, share, subscribe.
That's right. Yes, those are three great things to do. You can like us on Facebook. You can share our stuff on social media, whatever type of social media you want, and certainly subscribe to the podcast if you are if you haven't already done that, and tell your friends about it. Right? We also just love hearing from people. We love hearing from our listeners. Again, you can just contact us very easily, indigotogether.com/contact, and let us know what you're thinking about. Let us know your feedback. Let us know your questions. As you already know, if you're a regular listener, we sometimes devote entire podcast episodes to one person's question or idea. And so this is your opportunity to maybe hear us weigh in on something. And we're going to do actually a little bit of that here today.
Yeah, and LinkedIn's another good source. I get hit up a lot on LinkedIn, so it's really good. Also, one of the things that we're working on details is for some live web events, and maybe that's going to be YouTube Live or something like that. But as we go forward in that space, if you've got some input, we want it. Reach out, and if you're already doing this and your blood might be able to help others, we'd love to get some of those lessons learned and just kind of some of the formats by which you guys like to receive that kind of live content.
Excellent. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to a lot of that stuff that we're going to end up doing here in the near future. Another thing we're going to do in the near future is we're going to start having more guests. So we've had one guest so far, our good friend Joe Allen, but we're also going to look at a whole slew of people who we're going to start to have on. And we've just wanted to get this podcast up and rolling before we kind of venture into that space. And I think we're at a space where we can start doing that very shortly, as well as just kind of work out the technical details. But we're going to start having some great guests on here and really start to bring you the content that we think can be very helpful for you and interesting, and all within this big umbrella theme of what it takes to flourish at work and beyond.
Yeah, so we've got some pretty cool gear, mics that we can mail out to our guests. And I just want to thank the listeners who have already made some really clutch introductions to some people that we would love to have on our podcast. So if you have somebody you think should be on here, would love to hear who that is and get that introduction if we don't already know them. And thank you for those that have already teed that up for us already. So I don't know, Ben, shall we get to this stuff now?
Let's get down to it.
All right. So, like I said, we're going to do a grab bag, which is a little different for us. We're going to go through some of the wonderful letters or emails that have been sent in to us and respond to some of the great questions that they threw at us. So, first one comes from Paul from Wisconsin, and it's about leadership styles and corresponding work environments. Ben, you want to maybe read the email?
Sure. Yeah. So he said, "What's on your mind? Hi guys. Big fan of your podcast. Something that I have learned and like to keep learning about is leadership styles/types, and the best type of work environment or culture that is conducive to those types. Maybe worth a podcast? Question mark." Thanks, Paul.
We think so. Yeah, totally worth a podcast.
We have deemed it worthy.
All right, so let's get into this. So, leadership styles. This is kind of a like a loose hand grenade out there in the world of work. I guess I always start to think about, there's kind of two food groups within this, at least the way I think about it. Now, there's a lot of literature on this. There hasn't been like combined to just some unifying theory of the universe, So we got to kind of piece together something practically. So I think of like two things, like who that leader is. That can be kind of their personality, their mores, their integrity, are they gregarious? Are they more stern? That's kind of like who that person is as a person. And then there's those kind of leadership behaviors. So if somebody, sometimes people, and I see this a lot, we were asked to, look at a company and they felt that the leader wasn't charismatic enough.
Mm-hmm.
And, sometimes people have this idea, it comes out of the great man or great woman theory of leadership, that you just find this great person and somehow 1, 2, 3 magic, they've got profit now.
Right.
And what does the literature say about that, Ben?
So the leadership literature suggests that, people are successful, or most successful, leaders are most successful when they are a good fit between kind of their approach and the environment. So in some cases, some of these great people, these great men and great women, historical figures, leaders of companies, and so forth, many of them were in the right place at the right time. They were well suited for that environment. Others
accidentally successful.
Maybe to some degree, or they were chosen specifically for that. If we want to be more, give them the benefit of the doubt that they were chosen for that because they were a good fit. But yeah, it could have been a little bit of accident. But if there's anything that we know about leadership, it's that, being adaptable is really important. We don't oftentimes get to choose the environments in which we find ourselves, even if we do, if we very carefully choose the organization within which we work, we will find ourselves as leaders, facing many different types of situations. And because of that, we have to be able to adapt to that situation. If you just approach everything as the authoritative, decisive person who knows things, right? That is kind of a style of leadership. that's going to work in some circumstances, but it's going to not work in a lot of others. So the best success is found in being adaptable, having multiple modalities, so to speak, in which you can behave as a leader. And, if you really only have one style or you can't adapt, then the environment is even more important because you're going to be unsuccessful in those environments that aren't a good fit.
Yeah, let me throw something in here. So people say we need a leader, we need a strategic leader, a visionary leader. I immediately see them during the hiring, recruitment, that kind of process begin to look for personality types. And that can be okay. If you probably don't want to get like some backroom bean counter to come lead your visionary marketing platform as a service in Silicon Valley. You get what I'm saying. So there's certain personality fits might not do well, but that wouldn't be where I'd go first to looking at what you're hiring. So to your point, Ben, and I forget where this was, most people kind of have one leadership style, right? And that'll be some mix between their own personality and who they are as a person, at least anecdotally, what I've observed across bunches of companies, as that's a mix of kind of their personality, their experience of how they grew up, and maybe one or two key mentors that they may have had during their life. Or maybe they didn't have a mentor, but they served under a certain type of manager. I see this in the military all the time. It's like a captain will, his lieutenants that he churns out are kind of the same. And so they just have that one personality, that one leadership style. But what happens is that they go into other situations, and then all of a sudden they're not successful. And I use this Venn diagram. So one of the circles has a leader, the other has followers, and the other has situation. And I forget who did that model. I didn't come. People come up with models just to have ways to talk about these things. So you'll see that people that can adapt can thrive in more situations, right?
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
Yeah, well, and that's because they are able to read the situation and then change their behavior, right? So, just to kind of put our arms around some of these different, some of the bigger buckets of leadership styles that there are. So yeah, I mean, I guess if you had to boil down all leadership behavior, kind of the most classic way of thinking about this from organizational psychology is that there are two huge buckets of behavior. One is what we call initiating structure. All right. So all those things around organizing, harnessing people to some sort of mission or trying to coalesce a group in that way. And then there's establishing roles and responsibilities, all that kind of stuff. And then there's what we call consideration. And consideration is about having individualized, relationships and support networks that you build with the people whom you're trying to lead. So you can also think of these as kind of task-related behaviors versus people-related behaviors. And in some situations, you may need to have more or less of one of those. You also, for example, maybe you're going through, so those are kind of two different styles that you may have. Of course, you're going to want to have a mix in most situations. Other situations may require more of what we call a transformational style. And this is about guiding a team or an organization through a time of change or transformation. In other situations, you may even have more of a transactional style where it's kind of a, an exchange, a this for that type of thing. I do this for the group, they do this for me. Or even
I'll talk to management so you don't have to. You guys make me look good.
Right,
Deal?
right.
Deal.
Yeah. And maybe that would be appropriate in some situations. And then there's even kind of a passive or avoidant leadership style. And, and usually that's not a great idea. But here's the key. It's really about thinking about that situation. So let's use the example of, let's say you are in charge of a bunch of medical doctors, right? You probably, and they, even if you are a doctor yourself, you probably don't need to be telling these people what to do specifically on a day-to-day basis. That's part of their profession. That's part of what they do. That's part of what they know. And therefore, in your job in that situation is probably to, help remove some obstacles, to, create some structures for them to, make their lives easier and get out of the way. You don't have to be nearly as directive in those types of situations, assuming that people are doing generally what they're supposed to do, right? Because they are experts and they are doing a task that they are very well trained to do. Take that,
right, and that's why they organize those kind of experts. They're generally a professional organization. There's very clear roles and responsibilities so that those kind of subject matter experts can just thrive organically somewhat.
Right. But you contrast that with a bunch of people who, think of, you being in the Army National Guard, right? A bunch of really junior level folks who maybe just came from boot camp. Like, you're going to need to give them some direction, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wish they would listen to the direction. No. No, it's exactly right. And that, that's kind of brings us to the whole idea of, okay, well, the leadership style and then situation. So if you're a growth-minded person, and that's like one of those things, there's always this idea around emotional intelligence, right? And we kind of don't like that word.
Yeah, I just threw up a little bit in my mouth.
Oh, gross. Are we going to edit that? I don't know. Maybe we'll keep it in.
So,
but we don't like that word because of the term intelligence.
Yeah, and maybe that's just my my own bias as an industrial and organizational psychologist. I have a very specific idea of what intelligence means, and it doesn't have to do a whole lot with emotions. It also has to do with something that is relatively difficult for anyone to change. Instead, the way that I like to think about what a lot of people call emotional intelligence is social skill, the ability or the set of tools that someone has to be able to recognize other people's emotions and respond appropriately, as well as recognizing their own emotions and responding appropriately. So that is a skill you can learn through practice, learn through being more aware of other people and of yourself, versus something you have or don't have. So I like to think of it as social skill.
Yeah, and I like to think about as somebody who's mentored gobs of leaders, right? And like
hordes of leaders.
My motley horde, right? But I could put on a lot of these guys, and because I have a specific way in which I teach leadership and these kinds of skills in a very distinct pedagogy and system. A lot of people don't know that I actually was a professional guitarist for a bunch of years in Nashville. I ski a lot. I've been through a lot of educational systems. And one of the things in a pedagogy is, we all know a bunch of people that took a foreign language for 6 years and can't speak anything, right? Or, oh yeah, I took 13 years of piano. Oh, well, play me something. And they stink, right? And it's not always because they didn't practice, because a lot of people that put themselves out there say that they have a pedagogy or methodology, and then I say, well, great, show me your players, right? Like if you're an excellent piano teacher, let's see, you should have literally gobs of excellent piano students, right? And so it's the same thing with the leadership stuff. And so like one of the things, if you don't have a growth mindset, if you believe things are fixed, you need to be super careful about where you land, right? And sometimes, you're 2 years from retirement and you're like, dude, I'm just too old for this, right? There's no way I'm going to work there. It doesn't fit how I want to roll at the age of 70, right? Totally fine. So that could be choice. I'm going to choose that spot. But let's say we're in a down business cycle, right? And you just got out with your MBA and $100,000 worth of debt. Well, you probably want to put that growth mindset on and say, I need to learn how to thrive and adapt. And so Ben and I are both strong believers. Well, I'm confident, Ben, I haven't asked you this specific, that people can grow and change, right? And so these skills around leadership, and people can call them styles. I like to think about so we were talking about the two pieces, right? your person and who you are. If you're a very quiet person, trying to be, if you view stuff as it's a internal personality trait, leadership, which I reject that view, you might try to be super gregarious, and that's not going to come off very authentically.
Yeah.
Right.
Or even if you are very skilled at acting in that way, it's going to be exhausting over time.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, and then what did they publish all these books? The Bill Gates books, the Warren Buffett book, and leadership lessons learned from Jack Welch. And when I look at all these books, like, it's a great case study in what that person did. Mm-hmm. But there's not a whole lot of commonality between these guys, right? I mean, generally they have some pretty good business acumen. They'll have some hard business skills that we already know how to teach within the typical academic environment if the students are paying attention, right?
Right.
But and I've seen it in the military. Somebody that's so quiet, meek and mild, you think surely this guy can't lead an infantry platoon into combat. And they're amazing, right? So my coaching advice to listeners and individuals that I coach individually is, hey, listen, be true to your person. We did a whole episode on like kind of moral compass type issues. Develop your integrity and your moral compass. That's how you're going to set sail. That being said, we have all these ingredients that come out of awesome peer-reviewed leadership research and all of that stuff in industrial organizational psychology that can give you the tools. And one way to think about this is a chef that cooks a meal. Like, did you bite into that chicken and be like, I can tell that chef really has a gregarious personality. No.
I can tell if a chicken had a gregarious personality, but not the chef.
So then why do we do that? So organizations out there, normally we do these podcasts. We're like, what's this mean for organization, a manager, or an individual? But for organizations out there, be careful with the personality stuff. Handle that with care. You're playing with a little bit of fire with some of those assessments. There's some good stuff out there. Just handle that with care.
Yeah.
But you need chefs that can cook up awesome teams throughout your organization, which means you got to have some kind of learning and development around these skills. So It's like, okay, we got a bag of people, different personalities, different backgrounds. In the military, we don't even get to choose what that bag looks like.
Right.
Right. Hey, Ben, your mission is to go take that hill. Here's your 40 guys. And you're like, hey, that's a great mission and everything. But have you seen the numbskulls you hired me? Look at their DISC assessments. You don't get to do that. So it's like, okay, well, I got who I got. I'm going to start development. And that's where like we have a specific pedagogy and how we teach these leadership skills, both around psychosocial, team, and all those kinds of things. Don't worry about your personality.
Right.
All kinds can be successful. Worry about getting the ingredients, the recipes, the skills for how to adjust your approach that it's appropriate to the situation and to be able to drive results with a myriad of people.
Yep. And I think one way that the best organizations do this is that, they'll identify maybe what some of the competencies are that they want to see in their leaders and so forth from a development standpoint. But then they also construct and deliberately expose people to different situations and help them learn from them. If we know anything about other things that we kind of know this to be true, right, about leadership, is that to the extent that leaders are made, they are made through experience, and our experiences teach us things. And different types of experiences teach us different things. That's why some of the best organizations will deliberately take their high potential leaders and ensure that they have these kind of stretch experiences in maybe different parts of the business, maybe doing some challenging assignments, maybe overseas and so forth, maybe working on some high visibility projects. And also building into those types of assignments a systematic way in which they can reflect upon that experience and what they've learned. That way they're getting, this broad array of situations that they have to deal with, getting some coaching along the way, helping them to learn from it, and all of those different pieces of skill and knowledge then kind of come into play that way. If you're an individual thinking, well, how do I really kind of develop my leadership toolkit. One way is through education and training and reading a lot about this kind of stuff and seeking expertise and so forth. That's great. Another one, and I think this goes hand in hand with that, is through exposing yourself to various new experiences. Get out there, and if you're not getting it in your current professional environment, go out there and volunteer and do something. There are oftentimes just amazing opportunities for improving organizations through volunteer experiences on boards of directors for nonprofits, on just helping other people, right? There are all kinds of ways in which you can practice leadership skills for free.
Yeah, like go join a community choir or maybe a theater organization.
Sure,
it's out there. You gotta practice, and organizations don't do the throw the spaghetti against the wall approach. You complain. I hear this. We just don't have enough. Well, then, if it was really a problem, you'd probably start brewing your own, right? And if you brew your own, that means putting them in those situations and have some kind of coaching and education and refinement situation. Leadership training shouldn't just be for leaders, in my view. It could be for everybody. So if there is a leader that has maybe a key section of expertise, such as like contract law or something, this person's going to lead a bunch of lawyers and, they've just been a lawyer this whole time. Some coaching and feedback and allowing them to grow, but also when their subordinates understand these things, they can kind of manage and coach up and help that person be successful.
Sure. So, I think we've talked. We've had some. It's a great conversation, I think, around leadership development and so forth. And just to bring it back to to Paul's question about these leadership styles, I think people who are successful as leaders are good at adapting. They recognize whether, and they adapt to two things. They adapt to what the situation involves from a people standpoint. Like, are I working with a bunch of novices or experts here, right? Because your approach should differ. Experts need less direction. They need maybe some support and encouragement, and they need obstacles removed. Novices, they need more directive types of behaviors from you as the leader. And then the other function is what types of tasks are involved. Are these people doing things that are routine, or are they doing something that is non-routine, something that is very ambiguous? Because even if you have that group of experts, if they're doing something they've never done before, then you probably do need to be more participative or even directive in that situation if you have some knowledge that they don't about how they can succeed. So, adapting to the situation, absolutely critical, and is probably one of the strongest things that we know about leadership if you want to continue to be successful in different circumstances.
Right. And adapting doesn't mean being a chameleon.
Nope.
Yeah. And we'll get this question a lot from executives. Well, doesn't that just mean I'm just like a wet noodle? I'll make so much money because I'm so adaptive and I can do all this stuff. But in the end, I didn't lead anything, right? That's where your moral compass and these items come into play, where you can start pointing the direction. Like, yes, we could do that, but that's unethical and will damage our brand as well.
Right.
Right. And so it's not that you're milky toast, but you've got a whole pile of people you got to take somewhere, and they all have different backgrounds and stuff. And that's one of the easiest ways that you can, set your sail to get the team from point A to point to be discovered. Right.
Yes. Great. Awesome. So I think we covered the leadership styles. Point.
Thanks. Great question, Paul.
Awesome.
The next question is from Angela in Kentucky.
Yeah.
Ben, why don't you read the email?
Yeah, so I'm going to read this because it's so nuanced and I think thoughtful. She writes, "Hi, I've been listening to your podcast, which I really like. I am a people manager, and the topics are definitely relatable. A topic on my mind lately has to do with workplace boundaries. I do think this is a complex topic and not one size fits all. I am observing what I believe is a growing casualness in the modern workplace, with a finer and finer line between what info is shared in the workplace and what is kept private. This transpires in the way people communicate, what they communicate, and when they communicate. For example, I hear more and more employees sharing details about their health, etc., openly with colleagues, or employees openly divulging issues going on in their personal lives that have nothing to do with business. Technology certainly has an important role here too, because we're always on. Coworkers connecting on Facebook and sharing private details of their lives, or communicating via text, phone calls, emails after work hours from coworkers about not work-related and non-work-related stuff. In an age when companies are trying to promote more bonding to influence a positive culture, I think I sometimes think a consequence of that is an erosion of boundaries and even a lack of professionalism in some cases. On the one hand, it is nice that employees are friendly with each other, but on the other, shouldn't some things just be private? I would be curious to hear the Indigo team's take on this topic. Wow, a lot going on there. And I think it's just really well thought out.
Yeah, loaded. This is like, should somebody know if you're more of a boxers or briefs type person that's sitting in the cubicle next to you?
Yeah. I don't think that's necessarily something that everyone needs to know, right? But this is, so much going on. I think that in this question that we can start to unpack a little bit. And I think the first thing when we talk about personal and professional boundaries at work, like what is appropriate to talk about, what isn't, and so forth, is I think we got to recognize in today's day and age, and taking into account what Angela mentioned in her email about technology and so forth, is that, there is kind of this game that's being played here, this unspoken game between employers and employees about, keeping these things separate, but kind of seeming not to, and saying, okay, well, it's great that we have you on the hook now 24/7 with your email and other devices and so forth. At the same time, I don't want any bleed over in the workplace of your personal life, right? It's a very interesting dynamic that I think has evolved over the last 10 or 15 years.
Yeah, and I always say there's a game that's being played here.
Yeah.
It's a social game, right? And just like dating, you don't go to somebody at the pub that you think's attractive and just be like, let me give you my resume in 30 seconds or less, and, blah, 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 and let me tell you my social interests, blah, blah, blah. Quiet walks on the beach. Do you want to go out tomorrow? I mean, that's just not how you present yourself. Now, you may cover all those topics, right? But, you just conduct yourself socially in a way that's maybe a little bit appealing, right? So this game involves keeping these things separate, but seeming like you're not. So when people interact with somebody, they don't want to interact with somebody that seems super, super guarded, because it can be hard to build trust in that team environment. Like,
right,
is this person just like politically going to stab me in the back? Those kinds of things. That being said, playing that game of keeping things separate, you can still be super open, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so with executives, one of the things that I see this getting derailed is maybe they've moved to a new town and they got no friends.
Yeah.
They're just freaking lonely. And so they might at lunch or stuff, because we all have those social needs. So the first thing I encourage people to do is have a dynamic friends and family support group outside of the office. In as much as possible, get your emotional needs met from that group, so that when you're coming to the office, you can build. It's not, I have some really close friends that I've met that were coworkers that developed into very personal friends outside the office. But I was able to come to those relationships from a place of strength rather than a place of neediness, because I had developed that outside.
Mm-hmm. Right. And, I think it's also just important to realize that when someone at work is maybe in your perception, like oversharing, I think it's important to think about, well, first of all, like, who defines what oversharing is? That's the first question.
Right.
And, why do you consider to be oversharing? Sometimes what some people consider to be oversharing, other people obviously don't. And then I think even more importantly is, what are the motivations that person has? Why are they sharing those feelings and so forth? And, sometimes it is just that person doesn't have perhaps a whole lot of other people to talk to about things. And maybe you work in a place that is so demanding that, guess what? Like, they don't even have time to build those relationships, even if they wanted to outside of work.
Right. And I just be kind to each other, right? So one of the things as we talk about creating culture, one of the ways in which people want to build culture is like, oh, we have a good culture if everyone feels close to each other. And there's been some decent research around like church growth and some of those items. It talks about like those interpersonal decently close bonds break down around like what is it, like 250, 300 people, right? And so it'd be hard for you to build an enterprise level organization, 20,000 people or whatever, with everyone having that kind of culture. And then also, it prevents you from having a type of diversity that you might want to have. So I've seen this in places where the accounting person was really awesome and totally turned around a marketing ad agency kind of place. They did videos and stuff. Turn them around and get them to where the bills were mailed out on time, payroll went out on time. Totally awesome. Was that person like the creatives that work there? No. And like that was one of the things in talking with the organization is like, well, I just don't feel close to so and so in accounting. But that's okay. So if you're relying on personal bonding, trust falls and a bunch of those kinds of shenanigans to create culture, those things can be awesome. Do a high ropes course, team building, those things are wonderful, but that shouldn't be what you rely on. That wouldn't be the best approach for how to create in culture because it excludes some of those people that just have different personalities, but offer key skill sets and perspectives to your organization.
Right, right. So going back to this idea of professionalism, I think it is really up to the organization to think about first of all, like what are we trying to do as an organization? What is our mission? What is our brand as an organization? And in tandem with those things, thinking about what our values are, right? Because that's the key part of culture. And then from that you can use that to define well, what does professional behavior look like? And in some circumstances, maybe it means this is how we interact with each other. This is how we interact with clients and so forth. But if it's something if it has nothing to do with, your ability as an organization to execute your strategy, to help everyone feel included, then really doesn't need to be something you're worrying about.
Right. Yeah. And people use their feelings to assess these things, but they have such limited scope. So if you want to look at those like kind of personal professional boundaries and how they fit into larger cultures, like getting with somebody that can help you do a professional assessment with that, I just strongly recommend. Another idea is this idea that we use all the time of like a collaborative alliance. So we talk about personal professional boundaries. Most people that I observe kind of come in and they're building relationships in a similar way to which they build their friendships and stuff at university or, high school, at their, chess club or whatever that they're in. And because that's kind of their only modality of thinking about relationships. But one of the things I like about the term collaborative alliance is, we have a goal in mind. And let's collaborate together to do it. I get fulfillment in doing good work and being excellent. You get fulfillment in doing good work and excellence. And we may not have that emotional heart-to-heart connection, but like the U.S. and England allying against the Nazis, well, we didn't see eye to eye on a whole host of things. But kicking some Nazi rear end, we were down for that.
That's right. Yeah.
So introducing even that term collaborative alliance into your organization can be helpful in causing teams of individuals to rethink about how they engage with each other. Mm-hmm. So their litmus test for is everything going great, not one of I feel intimately close to all of my colleagues and we're all best friends, which can click off and exclude people. It's I feel totally satisfied with our collaborative alliance. Our organization has clear values, strategies, and goals. We can align ourselves behind those and have an alliance to getting what the broader organization needs and getting what we need, which may be, a paycheck, training for the role I really want, or, those kinds of things.
Right. So I think if we come back to part of Angela's question about, professionalism versus kind of casual relationships and so forth at work, I think it's interesting to kind of like put yourself in this situation. Let's imagine that you are the CEO of a company and, this is starting to bother you, that you feel like people are not being professional, that people are being overly, personal with each other and so forth. There are a couple different things that you might consider doing, right? Just kind of the full range of your options. One thing that may pop into your mind is, well, you know what? I'm gonna say this is what professionalism. I'm gonna cut this off, right? With some clarity, and I'm gonna say we do not talk about our health problems at work. We do not share these types of things with each other. This is work. Work is work, right? That could be one approach. Might there be any downsides to coming down hard on it like that?
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, command and control, should only happen in certain, if you're the only one that knows how to get out of a burning building, by God, take command of that situation. Walk, don't run that way, right? But yeah, you can't dictate those cultural elements because, the social deviants will just organize around them, right?
Yeah, they will organize around them, and you may just, it may go the other way and just turn into a really cold and unfriendly and kind of robotic type of environment that is actually very counterproductive to actually sharing information and getting work done. Another approach would just be to completely ignore it. Now, if you are, which may be fine.
Dial into some of that passive avoidant
style,
behaviors,
right? And that and that might be appropriate actually if it's not actually causing a big problem. I think what you'd want to assess here as a leader, a manager, really at any level in an organization like that, is you'd want to say, is this actually affecting work? Is this affecting how our productivity? Is it affecting our interactions with customers? Is it affecting our ability to drive projects to completion? And if the answer to those is no, then it probably isn't a problem that you need to worry about too much. If the answer is yes, then I think you can approach it from a communication standpoint in terms of the outcomes that you want to see. And say, look, I've noticed that we this is the outcome that we want in terms of maybe how we're executing on a project or something, and here's what we're currently doing. How can we do this better, team? Right? What would it take for us to get this done in 2 weeks? And start organizing yourself that way instead of kind of getting down into the nitty gritty weeds of what everyone is talking about. Because I think then it's like, hey, let's get people maybe redirected and refocused in terms of what's important here.
Right, and professional organizations and professional groups like CPAs, right? They have a code of conduct.
Sure.
And you can have these kind of values and supporting behaviors that align with those values listed, trained throughout your organization. And then when you onboard new people, you're able to bring them, up to pace on what that is. And one of those definitions is that you need is like, what is professionalism? If professional conduct is important to you, you got to define not only what it is, but what that looks like behaviorally. Mm-hmm. And that, we don't talk about our underpants with our colleagues or, any of those kinds of things. So, some organizations are okay with more of that bring your whole self to work perspective. Yeah. Others, it's more reserved, right?
Yeah. And I think when it comes to some of these issues of professionalism and casualness, so to speak, at work, one thing that you can do is helping people to have the communication skills to be able to, work out those problems themselves if they have them, right? So if you are in a situation where you're just tired of hearing about maybe someone's personal details all day long, finding good ways to talk about that with them, right? And maybe going back to some of the stuff we talked about in our difficult conversations episode and having that conversation with somebody saying, look, I really care about you and I want to have a good relationship. At the same time, I want to get things done. And I want to, maintain a boundary of sorts between work and non-work. Can we work together to make that happen? That's going to be a tough conversation, but equipping people to have that on kind of an individual basis, I think could be important because what one person thinks is oversharing, another person does not. And the key is that you want everyone at work to feel like they can truly be productive, that they can focus on what needs to get done, that they can have a decent time while doing it, and that they can truly flourish in their role.
Right. Another thing that I think we could bring up here on professionalism is this idea of having your own social media strategy.
Right.
I met this guy. I interviewed him for a project I was doing. He was like, I don't know, brand evangelist or one of those type titles for the CAO cigar company, which was based before they got bought by that Swedish Match. I can't remember. Anyway, this was a homebrewed cigar company out of Nashville, Tennessee. Really creative media and everything. Dude's got a sleeve of tats. He looks cool as all get out, right? I mean, he just looks, and he was the brand ambassador or something like for that. And so his thing is, whenever he's out in public, he's always smoking a cigar. He always looked cool. His social media, Twitter, Facebook, all that, etc., completely aligned seamlessly with the brand and websites and all that stuff of the organization. And that was holistic. That's fine. I know some people that have this idea of, somebody's like, yeah, so where are you on Facebook? I'll add you. Hey, no offense. I keep my Facebook stuff separate from people I work with. That could be a good strategy for you there. That being said, if you're stepping up, and I've seen some people that were killed the interview, were awesome in a super, super culturally reserved company. And then they just go, well, let's go look at his Facebook or her Facebook. And it is like, man, is there a night that they're not on some scantily clad bender at the bars? Huh. Is that, right. Because especially as you start to move up the ladder, and actually I think this should be everything. Who you are in person should be consistent across the board, right? Mm-hmm. And so you might want to ask, is the way I'm conducting myself, is this a good representation? We're talking about that personal, professional boundary line. Is the way I behave build trust in an employer and in others that I'm good to go to deliver? Now, I think there's some cultural impediments that we fail, like somebody may have, I know for a while there was certain ethnic garbs that people would wear that HR people struggled with, if in the military, we have some people that wear turbans, right? And that's a different, type of headgear, so you can have all of these kinds of things, but as an individual level, you need to say, well, what course am I trying to chart? And do I want to die on that hill of, listen, freedom, what I do in my free time's my own. So if I want to have an adult website for my weekend gig and work at a Catholic charity, they should let's be practical here. That stuff's not going to work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. So I think the social media piece of this is important, especially because it interacts with how we share our lives. And it can be certainly a way in which, people are kind of perpetuating that relationship outside of work that they normally have inside of work. And I think that to some degree, again, this stuff can be okay. And it comes back to, is this affecting something that matters at work? Or is it just something that I feel like is, a little different from how I might approach the workplace?
Right. And put your thinking cap on. If you were your own friend, which you should be a friend to yourself, right? How would you advise you conduct yourself personally and professionally? Should there be a big delta between those two? Probably not.
Right.
Cool. So what we talked about today is leadership styles. And then that was from Paul in Wisconsin. And then we talked about disentangling personal professional boundaries in the workplace. Angela from Kentucky. So thank you, Angela. Thoughtful questions. Thank you, listeners. Do send us comments, feedbacks, and all that kind of stuff.
That's right. Thank you all so much. Thanks for listening to the Indigo Podcast. If you like this podcast, please consider helping us by rating us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen, telling your friends about us, having us on your podcast, or mentioning us on social media. Our website is www.indigopodcast.com, where you can access more information about us and this episode. Thanks again, and we look forward to talking with you again soon.